we've got our first hire ready to go. And he said, well, how do you know that person is the right person to hire? What process did you go through? Did you do a coding test? And that's one way of knowing, are they a great engineer? And we said, no, we actually didn't do that. And so we went back and did that, and we decided not to hire that person. Maybe they would have worked out, I don't know, but we were being more thorough about who we hired.
Good Monday morning. Have you ever wondered how successful and happy people got their starts? Every success story begins somewhere, often more humbly than you'd expect. I'm Leilani Brown, host of Your First Job, the podcast.
Good Monday morning. Today, we are talking to my good friend, Parker Harris, the Chief Technology Officer and Co-Founder of Salesforce, the world's largest customer relationship management platform. As Salesforce celebrates its 25th anniversary, I am thrilled to chat with Parker about his unique journey, starting from a liberal arts background, just like me, and transitioning into the tech world, not like me, co-founding one of the most successful companies in the history of the industry, and reflecting on how technology has evolved from when Salesforce began to where we are now. We're also going to talk about some big topics shaping the future, like AI, which has sparked a lot of excitement and also some concern about the future of work. And so Parker's had a front row seat to massive technological challenges, and I can't wait to hear his perspective. Let's get into it. Welcome to Your First Job, Parker. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Leilani, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I always like to start not with what your first job is, but with the question of what you do today. How would you describe your role today, vocation-wise, career-wise?
Yeah, so I'm currently sitting in my home in San Francisco. We are trying to get everyone back to the office. Our headquarters is San Francisco. That's where Salesforce started. I've done many different roles, always on the technology side. And in January, I moved in. It was kind of an unusual move. I moved into the Slack business unit, and I currently run engineering for Slack. And the main reason is I'm trying to go as fast as possible to bring Slack closer to Salesforce, both culturally and technically.
That's exciting. And we are Slackers at Giant Steps. We use Slack, and I use Slack with some of my clients, actually. So I would love to talk about that.
What's funny, Leilani, is I've used that term Slackers, and I get in trouble because they don't like it. It's not a term that we use. They're not Slack.
So what are we then? We're Slack users?
Slack users, Slack lovers.
Slack lovers. Where did Slack come from? Where did the name Slack come from?
The structured log of all content and knowledge.
I bet you no one has known that until moment. I guess internally you'll know it.
Right. Oh, conversations. Sorry, I didn't even get it right. Searchable log of all conversation and knowledge. So I didn't even get it right. And so that's what it was when it started. It actually started as a game. The game failed, and then it became Slack. And so if you've ever heard of Flickr, that also started as a game. The founders started a game, and it became Flickr. And then they did it again with Slack. So,
well, it's much more efficient, I will tell everybody, than text messages. Because you're not losing them. And at least you can sort things in a much more efficient way.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know that everybody knows that the companies are co-owned and affiliated and connected.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to fix.
Well, we'll shout it from the rooftops. When I think about Salesforce, I probably don't think about it in the way some others might think about it. I think about it as the technology that touches almost everything in my life. And whether it be registration and information at my doctor's appointments, or admissions and enrollments, and we sit on a board together at Middlebury, or every time I turn around, Amazon serving up an affiliated purchase that I might like. Am I getting it right that Salesforce has happily, really mastered customer relationship management in a way that others have not?
Mark Benioff, who's our co-founder and CEO and chairman of the board, was at Oracle Corporation, and he was seeing the early internet as I was, and Amazon as a bookseller was one example. And there was early technology called thin client computing. So when Netscape Navigator came out, you use a browser as a client instead of a heavy piece of software that you install. And the next step is, well, couldn't you just do that and use a browser for a service? You don't install Amazon to buy a book or buy a CD at the time. The store evolved and you didn't have to install a new version of the store. And so the vision was, well, what if Salesforce automation at the time, so only empowering salespeople and sales teams, what if that were as easy as buying a book on Amazon.com? And, No Software was one of the brands that we started out with. We had a No Software logo. Many people would come to me and say, I know you have software behind all of that. I'm like, yes, we do have software, but we're not shipping it. We're not giving you CDs. You're not buying computers, hiring people to run those computers, upgrade the software. And so, in many ways, we evolved from the consumer internet and what was successful in the consumer internet. And it was novel at the time. And now it's, everywhere that, companies of all kinds are building services that you use on the internet or on your phone through the internet to do your jobs.
Yeah. And I think there's an expectation almost for everybody that's a user. But you went to Middlebury College and you studied English. What do you know about technology? Or asked another way, how do you think having a liberal arts degree prepared you for a career in technology and also entrepreneurship and innovation?
I fell in love with computers as a kid and got one of the early Apple II computers from Apple, learned to program on that and build software. And it's just one of my loves. I love, the plasticity of a computer programming language, that you can make it do all kinds of things just by, what's in your head. I got to Middlebury College and was going to major in mathematics, and I took linear algebra, and they couldn't explain to me what the use of linear algebra was. Turns out today, linear algebra is one of the foundational pieces of mathematics for generative AI. And so it turns out it's very useful. And I think the mathematicians are taking over the world. And Middlebury also did not have a major in computer science at the time.
Yeah.
And I had spent my senior year in high school in France studying. And I think part of that and part of like exercising, a different part of the brain was something, and a different challenge. I decided to major in English literature, and I loved it. And I think there's something about your question about liberal arts. I think liberal arts prepares you in business to be able to communicate as well as do your job. So I can spend time with some of our smartest architects, the technologists, computer science experts, far smarter than me in computer science. And I can understand and I can work with them, and we can, talk about where we're going technically. And then I can take that and I can go talk to, the sales team or the lawyers or the people running compliance, and translate what we're doing in English, and English literature is also about storytelling. In business, you have to sell, you have to market, you're telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then I think with what AI is doing to the world, actually, I think liberal arts has become even more important as a skill that, you may not have to be an expert in computer programming, but you're going to need to be able to understand how to leverage AI. You're going to have to understand the ethics of it, and there's going to be a lot of aspects that, a broader educational background will help you be more successful.
Right. I think I totally agree with you. And I find as a user, at least personally daily, and probably business wise daily, it is about the prompts, at least for the way that I use it, and being able to sort of think through how I'm prompting it to help organize my thoughts or organize my travel or organize a list or summarize and categorize. Yet there are people who are afraid of AI, afraid that it's going to require another set of skills or take over the world, or there's too much information out there. What do you say to the people who are not excited, but actually a little afraid and resistant because, they do exist out there?
Well, I mean, don't forget this happens during every big shift. So during the Industrial Revolution, the Luddites, when tried to destroy the machines that were getting created, from the steam engine and the loom and all of the new machines that were destroying jobs and taking away people's livelihood. So my answer to anyone who's afraid is it's okay to be afraid, but if you put your head in the sand and you don't embrace and learn where we're going, you will be left behind. And
Mhm.
I do believe that AI will, quote unquote, take some jobs, meaning some jobs will change. You don't, to create fabric now at scale, you don't have humans weaving, you have machines doing it for you. But we created more jobs than we ever had through the Industrial Revolution when, the computer came out and we all started using computers. I don't think we had less work. I don't think we're, writing less or, communicating less. We're communicating more, we're doing more work. And so these are just new tools. And I do think there will be more jobs created. I think the challenge is those jobs may be different than the current jobs. They may need new skills. And so I do worry that people won't get retrained. They won't all move into this future.
Mhm.
And, the partisanship and the anger that we have in the world today, because some people feeling left behind, may get worse if we're not careful. And,
Mhm.
and I think, education, retraining is really important. Helping, governments and many other leaders in the world need to be worried about this. And how do we bring the whole world forward? Because it will be very disruptive. It already is.
Mhm. Mhm. It occurs to me that collaboration is a cornerstone of how you lead, whether it is Slack or and collaboration through communication, or even Dreamforce. And you mentioned at the top of our connection and chat your desire to bring people back into the office as a business imperative. What are you seeing post COVID within your own workforce around collaboration, people wanting to come together, not coming together, over relying on virtual work?
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you're seeing about collaboration and lack of collaboration?
Well, it's interesting. We closed the acquisition of Slack in 2019, just before the pandemic and everything shutting down. And we were amazed, at thankfully things like Zoom and other types of video capabilities existed, and so we all kept working. And then Slack was your digital HQ, was a place to do
Mhm.
work, and so we were celebrating getting more work done than ever. We were surfing into people's homes, and they were the C-suite of these corporations that actually it was harder before to get access to them. And all of a sudden we were able to connect with them and sell to them, and our engineers were building software. So, at first we thought, oh, this is amazing. This is a future world. Uh, but then 2 years later, because of our growth, half the company at least was new, because we have people who leave the company, we hire people. And so through growth, a few years, you get a lot of new people. And we realized all these people, they didn't know us.
Know each
They
other.
didn't,
Yeah.
they didn't know each other as well as they should. They didn't know our culture. They weren't learning as much through osmosis of, salespeople being with each other and watching, like, well, I see how you did that call. That's interesting. And you closed that deal, and asking, and so that siloed nature, the solitary aspect of remote work, started to affect us and our growth and our success. And so we started asking employees to come back together more. It hasn't been without challenges. People reoriented how they work, where they work, with the expectation that they didn't have to come into the office. Some people are, saying, well, I don't understand how I could live my life and come into an office, because they came into the workplace through hybrid work. And so they had formed a life, and, childcare is difficult for parents that have to work, as one example. And if you don't have to come to the office, it certainly makes aspects of that better. So I think we haven't figured out the new world we need to be in. I do believe it's hybrid, uh, because it's wonderful, especially for parents or people who are taking care of loved ones that may need help, or just simple things of your life. Hybrid work is great, and so we need some blend. But Salesforce is definitely moving back towards wanting to hire people in similar locations. We call them hubs,
Mhm.
so that we don't have to pay for the travel to get people together, and let them be wherever they want, and we will pay the expense of bringing you together. And so there's also that shift, kind of back to, more hub-based hiring strategies and employee bases.
Yeah. I think there's an aspect of that working remotely early career that nobody really talks about. And that is the value of connection and visibility and advocacy, even getting to know your colleagues so that they can say, hey, Parker's a great guy. I think you should put him on this project. And there's a trade-off, but there's a disproportionate impact to people who are early career and, dare I say, even different, right? People don't get the opportunity to know you.
Absolutely. We hire a lot of people out of university. Uh, one year early after the pandemic, they were all in the office. They were dying to be in the office, and yet they were with each other. So they were all brand new employees with each other, but the people they worked with were not in the office, and it was not great, because they were not feeling like they were part of this company as much, because their managers or their colleagues were on a Zoom or on video, not with them. We even, for cost reasons, at one point said, well, we'll just close the office on Fridays, because there are not enough people in the office, save some expense. And they were very upset. Like, we want to be in the office on
Yeah.
Fridays. My daughter had that experience. She was in publishing, and she took me to her office, and there was no one there. They were all, and she was very proud of where she worked, and, but she would come in sometimes and there might be one other person. This was a previous job. And I felt very badly for her that, a new work experience should be much more celebratory and, culturally enriching. And so I do think that there are things we have lost from the pandemic, how the pandemic has affected us, that we still don't fully understand, and this was one of them.
Yeah, we're doing some research around it, and it does track to generation. If you are a person who who had to go to school during a hybrid or a remote experience, you were looking forward to the world of work and being in the office. If you were a person who's a Gen Xer like me, I was over it. And so there's a lack of connection and mentorship. But you
Yeah.
do have a major convening, a global convening that is the hottest ticket in town. I was able to go to it before COVID, and that is Dreamforce. What was the designs behind that?
So Dreamforce is our conference held every year in San Francisco. I think we've done 13 of them over the years. This year in San Francisco, we had about 60,000 people come in person, over, several million online. And the purpose of Dreamforce has always been to get our customers, our partners, our nonprofits that we work with, our employees all together to, number one, talk about what we're doing, where we're going, inspire them, have them talk to each other and learn from each other, the good and the bad. And also, as you saw, Leilani, lots of other content to enrich our guests that might be speakers on health and wellness, or on the political situation and where we're going. There are monks come, and you can come meditate with these monks from Plum Village in France. And then we have a music. It's enriching in many ways, and it's a big event. Selfishly for our company to grow, but also to give back to our stakeholders every year. And right after the pandemic, it was very important. We had one. It was all outside, I believe. It was small. And we kept pushing the envelope of how fast can we get back to everyone together. I think the first time we had it, excuse me, everyone back at scale, the city felt reinvigorated in San Francisco. The businesses were so thankful. The hotels, the restaurants, the streets were full, because all of our cities were also impacted by the pandemic, and some didn't come back as fast as others. And so, we were doing our part in San Francisco to inject more energy back into it.
But that's remarkable, because I think, to your point, not only there's an impact in San Francisco locally, but there's been probably a residential impact with people exercising the right to work from anywhere and leaving our cities. And so I think that's really important. Absolutely. So I have to ask you, what was your first job growing up in North Carolina?
My first job I was a bricklayer's assistant. That meant that I carried bricks and I helped stir the cement. And so, I learned how to throw a stack of bricks up a scaffolding. So that's an interesting trick. So you take 5 or 6 bricks, throw them up, and then catch them. So if you
how many times did you have to throw them before you learned to step back?
It was scary. And there's a picture of me on top of a residential house. They were building a chimney, and I'm way up there. And it was the heat of North Carolina, and I don't know if I would let my children do it, because it was not maybe the safest up there on scaffolding, not roped in. But it was a great experience. I did some jobs like that a few summers, which gave me a great appreciation of just hard work, diversity of people coming into the workplace, and different paths of life. So it was great.
Yeah. I would imagine that you have also a different appreciation for construction.
I do.
And the strength of a house. And not a small job, an important job, especially as we rebuild. What advice would you give to young Parker at that time?
And I think when I look at my early jobs and early career, one of my faults is I don't look out in the future that much. I'm look fairly near term, and dive into whatever's happening in the moment. And I'm kind of very iterative and tactical. I probably would advise myself to think a little bit more long term, and how my steps now might affect where I'm going. I feel like I've been very lucky, better lucky than smart. I've been very lucky, but a little bit more foresight and planning might have helped a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Do you think that as you've gotten older, you're more cautious? And would you want to hold on to some of that optimism and, dare I say, even ignorance about how difficult something can be? Because
one of my personalities, it kind of shocks my wife sometimes, is I might be thinking about something and making a decision, but then when I make the decision, I go quickly. I'm like, boom, let's go. And sometimes that, for me, I've been processing, and then when I make the decision, but if you're not in my head, it looks like a very fast, decision or a fast change. But I also think that's maybe what's helped me be successful in life is, sometimes going with a little bit of a gut feel of like, okay, this seems like something that could be great, and then diving in head first and really going for it and not being hesitant.
Yeah.
And not being, and maybe my not thinking too much about the future made me not worry about failure as much.
Right. You go for it.
Because I wasn't thinking about like the long term. So yeah, that's probably part of it.
So we might have people listening to this who have designs to be a founder, an entrepreneur. I'm now an entrepreneur. Ben Horowitz wrote in his book recently that there are two feelings that you have when you're an entrepreneur. It's either euphoria or terror, and the lack of sleep enhances both. I love saying that line. What advice would you give to Parker, the founder, Parker, the entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think one piece of advice I always give people is, don't follow ideas, follow people. I met Mark Benioff, and he's the one who came to me and our other two co-founders with the idea of building this company. And the idea was really compelling at the time. We had some, background in Salesforce automation. We were doing early cloud computing consulting, but it was Mark Benioff that I was betting on more than anything. Same with my co-founder, Dave Molinoff, brilliant technologist. I left a company and he and I went out and started a little consulting company prior to Salesforce. And I was betting on him more than the work we were going to do. And so ideas are very, very important. But the people that you align with that you're going to build a company with and be an entrepreneur with are the most important. And if you are around people or hire people that aren't those types of people, you need to get rid of them, which is a little hard. One of the, first things I learned from Mark is we were going to hire our first engineer. And we said, Mark, we've got our first hire ready to go. And he said, well, how do you know that person is the right person to hire? What process did you go through? Did you do a coding test? And that's one way of like knowing, are they a great engineer? And we said, no, we actually didn't do that. And so we went back and did that, and we decided not to hire that person. Maybe they would have worked out, I don't know, but we were being more thorough about who we hired. So I think, people are so important. And then the other bit of advice, which I think Mark has far more than me in terms of an entrepreneurial spirit, is the tenacity of, not giving up and really powering through. Because every startup, every entrepreneur is going to hit some very, very hard times. Salesforce almost ran out of money, which, you probably never see in our history the way
we don't hear about you guys bragging about that.
No, we don't talk about it. But, we had some very hard points in our history, like any enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And, not giving up and looking at that as a time to, have the terror, but to, really dig in and really do whatever it takes to make it successful. And then my final bit of advice is who are you serving? Don't forget, whatever you're doing, don't get lost in talking to each other. Remind yourself who you're serving, and are you serving them well? And are you asking them, who's your customer? And are you talking to your customers? Are they happy? If they're not happy, what are you doing to satisfy their needs? And developing that trust with your customers that you will make them successful is really the most important thing. And companies can get lost in their own, technology or services or management and be talking to each other too internally and lose focus of what's most important.
Absolutely. Those things seem like they would translate into what you look for in talent when you're looking for talent and for who might be successful at Salesforce and also at Slack. What do you look for when you're looking for talent, you're hiring that next great superstar to join the organization? What are some of the top 2 or 3 things that you look for?
Well, I think there's the obvious things that anyone's going to, focus on, talent, intelligence, all of that would be, the obvious things. But probably the one thing I always look for is, do you have someone, and I'm thinking about, when I'm hiring leaders, managers, and when I hire leaders, I want a leader who can lead, who can delegate, who's shown a history of success at scaling, some group, and that can delegate, but also a leader who can be in the details and can, knows, everything about whatever it is they've been working on without being a micromanager. And this art of, leading, a team and leverage and getting the best out of a group of people without micromanaging them, but knowing every detail of what's going on and being able to dive in if you see something that needs attention, to get into the level of detail. And maybe you could call it micromanagement, and then pulling back out. And, those are the best leaders to me, and finding them is hard. But I think it's a talent that scales great organizations. And you can have someone who's a hierarchical delegator, command and control. That doesn't work. And you can have the micromanager that doesn't let their employees grow and get the best out of them. That also doesn't work. You need something kind of in between, which is an art.
Yeah. Parker, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast and talking to people about career and work and all things innovation. And we really, really appreciate it. And I appreciate your friendship.
Absolutely, Lonnie. I've loved getting to know you. We serve on a board together, and love to watch you lead as well. And I learn from you as well. So thank you.
Your First Job is a production of Giant Steps, LLC, a company working at the intersection of strategy, culture, career, and education. I'm Leilani Brown, CEO and host of the show. Many thanks to our executive producer, Sam Osborne, and Maxwell Brown for producing our show music and this episode. You can learn more about our company and the podcast by visiting giantstepsllc.com. Thank you for listening.